A Missouri judge is now weighing in on whether to overturn the state's abortion ban following the passage of Amendment 3, which protects abortion. Lawyers from Planned Parenthood and the Attorney General's office argued the case today. Our Missouri Capitol reporter Hannah Falcon attended the trial.
Although Missouri voters passed Amendment 3, Missouri's abortion ban is still on the books. That's why Planned Parenthood filed this lawsuit to overturn the ban and all other laws restricting abortion providers less than 24 hours after polls closed. Although election results are not official yet, Planned Parenthood argues there is no doubt the amendment passed and should go into effect at midnight on Friday. This lawsuit argues that abortion ban is unconstitutional because Amendment 3 guarantees access to abortion and other forms of birth control in the state constitution. Planned Parenthood is asking the court to put a pause on the abortion ban until this lawsuit can fully play out. The state argues the request is too far-reaching. Lawyers and the Attorney General's office say there are restrictions that should be in place, such as a 72-hour waiting period to get an abortion after meeting with a provider, and a ban on getting an abortion based on race or the potential for having something like Down syndrome.
Trying to take down dozens of laws, dozens of regulations that have bipartisan support, have been passed for decades under Republican administrations and Democratic administrations. And they're doing this just because they want to cut costs at Planned Parenthood.
Every single day that Missourians cannot access their constitutional rights, they're being denied critical care.
Planned Parenthood says that with permission from the court, it is ready to start providing abortions this Friday. The judge did dismiss the hearing today without making a decision, but one is expected very soon. Reporting in Kansas City, I'm Hannah Falcon.